The next steps in the planning process are to develop alternatives and evaluate those alternatives. The CPA 52 can be an integral part of that process. When we open the EEPT, it automatically opens on the Benchmark Selections tab. We need to go to the CPA 52 tab, so we will click the tab at the bottom of the screen. We should first record the description of our alternatives, including the no action alternative. So we click in the no action alternative description cell. An information box appears, telling us the type of information that is needed. So we click on the drop-down button. The pre-written narratives appear, and we select the applicable one. We could double-click to edit the narrative, or in this case, we can click in the cell contents window at the top and replace the bracketed text with site-specific information. Next, we click in the first alternative description cell. We review the information box and click on the drop-down button and choose the applicable narrative. In this case, our alternative is an RMS alternative with practices 340 cover crops, 345 residue management mulch till, 410 grade stabilization structures, 600 terraces, 590 nutrient management, 595 integrated pest management, 580 stream bank and shoreline stabilization, and 412 grassed waterways. So we edit the narrative to include all of those practice codes. Since this is an RMS alternative, we check the box to signify that. We have developed two alternatives, so we click in the second alternative description cell. We click on the drop-down button, and then we will choose the applicable narrative. In this case, our alternative is a progressive alternative with practices 340 cover crops, 345 residue management mulch till, 590 nutrient management, 595 integrated pest management, and 391 riparian forest buffers. So we edit the narrative to include all of those practice codes. Descriptions of all our alternatives are completed. Another change with this version is the addition of buttons to freeze the heading pane. Freezing the heading locks rows 1 through 16 in place so you can see the alternative descriptions as you scroll down and enter the effects of the alternative. So we will click the Freeze Heading button. We click in the cell for no action for the first concern. An information box appears telling us the type of information that is needed and the availability of pre-written narratives. So we click the drop-down button. The pre-written narratives appear and we select the applicable one. Since the predicted effects of the alternative does not meet the planning criteria for the concern, we check the Not Meet PC checkbox. We click in the cell for the next alternative. We review the information box and click the drop-down button, and we select the applicable narrative. In this case, the predicted effects of the alternative meets the planning criteria for the concern, so we do not check the Not Meet PC checkbox. We click in the cell for the next alternative. We click the drop-down button and select the applicable narrative. Again, the predicted effects of the alternative meets the planning criteria for the concern, so we do not check the Not Meet PC checkbox. We click in the cell for no action for the next concern and scroll down to view the concerns. Notice that since we froze the heading, as we scroll down, the descriptions of the alternatives remained in view. We will continue to use this process to record the effects of the alternatives on each resource concern listed on the form. Continue in this manner to record the effects of no action and each alternative for each resource concern. As we scroll down, notice that the heading remains visible so that you can review the alternative descriptions at any time. After the effects for all of the alternatives and all of the concerns are documented, we should scroll down to the human considerations. Then we should document the effects of each alternative, including the no action alternative, on the human considerations. Using the information boxes to understand the type of information needed and choosing an applicable narrative and filling in any blanks with site-specific information. After the human considerations are documented, we should scroll down to the special environmental concerns. We click in the cell for no action for the first special environmental concern. We should review the benchmark before making our choice. Just like the other concerns, an information box appears telling us the type of information that is needed and the availability of pre-written narratives. So we click the drop-down button. We select the pre-written narrative. We should also document if the alternative may affect the special environmental concern or have no effect. We will complete the effects of all the alternatives for the Clean Air Act in this manner. Let's move to the Clean Water Act, Section 404. We click the No Action cell and review the benchmark condition. We click the drop-down button, Review, and select the applicable narrative. We also document whether or not there will be effects. We click in the cell for the next alternative, in this case, the RMS alternative. We click the drop-down button, review, and select the narrative. Note that the RMS alternative includes the stream bank stabilization practice, which may result in discharges of dredged or fill material. Once the narrative is selected, we should edit it to document whether or not the client has gotten or will get the necessary permits. We should also document that there may be effects and that further actions are needed. We move to the last alternative for the Clean Water Act, Section 404, which is the progressive alternative. We click the drop-down button, review, and select the applicable narrative. Note that this alternative has a riparian forest buffer instead of a stream bank stabilization practice, which would not result in discharges of dredged and fill material. This alternative would have no effect to the Clean Water Act, Section 404, and would not need further action. We should continue in this manner to document the effects of the alternatives on the other special environmental concerns. Once the effects of all the alternatives are recorded for all concerns and considerations, we should check to see that all the narrative information is visible, and we may have to resize some of the rows. So we click on the Edit Benchmark and/or Row Height button. We are taken to the first row of information, so we scroll down to check all of the row heights to make sure the narratives are visible. If any of the rows need to be resized, click and drag the bottom line of the row to expand it. Once we have checked the narratives, we need to document any required permits, consultations, or reviews. So in Section K, we click on the top cell for the No Action alternative. Note that there are 4 rows where information can be entered. An information box appears telling us the type of information that is needed and the availability of pre-written narratives. So we click the drop-down button. A list of permits, reviews, consultations, etc. appears, and we select the applicable one. For the no action alternative, none are required. We click in the top cell for the next alternative. We review the information box and click the drop-down button. For this alternative, a 404 permit may be required, so we select that option. Since there may be concerns with E and T species, we need to document the need for that review. So we click on the second row in the alternative cell. We click the drop-down button and document that a consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is needed. We also need to document the need for a cultural resources review. So we click in the third row. We click the drop-down button and select the narrative to document a review by SHPO as needed. We will repeat the process for the third alternative with similar items, except a 404 permit is not required. We should also document the cumulative effects that may result from the combination of these actions with other actions in the past, present, and future, including the actions of others. So we click on the No Action cell and record the cumulative effects. When we click on the cell, a drop-down appears. However, there are no narratives included for use at the national level. States may tailor example narratives to fit local conditions if appropriate. So we type in a narrative describing the cumulative effects and repeat for the other alternatives. We should also describe any required mitigation that is not already included in the effects descriptions above. So we type in the information and repeat for the other alternatives. Since some resource concerns are not required to be evaluated based on the land use, such as wildlife habitat because there is no wildlife modifier, and those concerns may be affected, a cell has been added to the form to document effects to those concerns. So we type in the effects and repeat for the other alternatives. We have now documented all of the effects of the alternatives and are ready to present them to the decision maker for a decision. Before we do that, let's check to make sure everything is complete. Click on the Unfreeze Heading button and scroll through the CPA 52 to make sure all items are completed. It looks like everything is complete. Now all we need is a producer's decision.